Welcome to the CMO Spotlight, and I'm here with Michael Smith, who's the Chief Marketing Officer of NPR, which is National Public Radio. Welcome, Michael.
It's great to be with you, Joe.
Absolutely. So I wonder if you could first, Michael, tell us a little bit about NPR as an organization. Many of us are really familiar with National Public Radio through our local affiliates, but I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about the organization and your role there. And then I want to hear a little bit about your journey to getting to this role.
Sure. Yeah, NPR is called National Public Radio, and it started about 50 years ago. It was actually created by local public radio stations around the country who had a need for a national news service. Sort of think of like the Associated Press of radio. And they created a nonprofit called NPR to create daily news coverage for them. And the first show was called All Things Considered. It was an afternoon 3-hour news show that was basically distributed, that was shared across all public radio stations and funded by donations to local stations, which that money was combined to produce the show and support NPR. And then over the years, we've expanded the amount of programming that we produce for stations to things like Morning Edition, which is another daily radio show. You know, there's a noontime show, there are weekend shows, about 15 to 20 different shows that we produce and distribute for local public radio stations. And then in more recent times, we've become a pretty big podcast. We're actually the third most listened to podcaster in the country, with a whole slew of about 45 different podcasts. And then we also produce a lot of digital video content. Probably the most notable is the Tiny Desk Concert Series, which are a series of music concerts that we do. And we have a lot of great content on Instagram, and now we're getting into TikTok. But our main charter is to make content that creates a more informed public and just a more culturally aware and inspired and enriched public. And it started through audio, but now it's multimedia.
I love it. So as the Chief Marketing Officer, what is that? Often Chief Marketing Officers are cat wranglers, but I'm wondering what your role looks like within the organization.
Yeah, well, marketing is actually a relatively new thing for NPR. The marketing for the first 45 years was mostly word of mouth. It was doing great content for stations, and people use the term backseat baby, and that's kind of how we kept our audience going, is that people would be kids in their parents' cars and hear NPR, and then they'd grow up and listen to it, and then their kids would listen to it, and it was really kind of the best kept secret because it was a small audience, but very passionate, and provided a great support for NPR. But in recent years, we realized that incumbent or implicit in our name is national and public, and we really need to reach the entire public, and we can't do that without marketing. And I'm actually only the third CMO for the company in its history. But what I primarily do is work on the two platforms that we have the most reach to people, which one is our in-house platform through our podcasts and our radio broadcasts and our websites, and how we leverage that platform to make people more aware of our content. And then through off platform paid media spending, which is something that we hadn't done in the past, but we're starting to invest now in actually buying advertising on the radio and podcasts and on social media to make people more aware. I mean, one of the statistics that really surprised me when I first came to NPR was that among all Americans, less than 50% of people have even heard of NPR or National Public Radio. Wow. So that's a huge amount of people that aren't even aware of the great work that we do, and especially even among younger people and more diverse audiences, those awareness numbers are down in the 30% range. But the good news for us is that when we make people aware of the content that we do, the first response we get is more of an aha. Oh, I didn't, the kind of a surprise, like a pleasant surprise. And I didn't realize that there was this fantastic content, in news and culture available that was actually free. It's not behind a paywall. It's available 24 hours a day on any platform. So I feel like my job is just really being almost like a gospel evangelist.
Right.
Get the good news out about NPR and the work that we do. In every way.
Well, and I have some nice connections to NPR and some people that I know that work for various parts of the organization, and I know it's a difference to go from the for-profit world to the nonprofit world. I know you've had a very interesting career path that's been largely focused on broadcasting for most of your career. So I wonder if you could just tell us a little bit about your path, and then also kind of what it's like to now be in the nonprofit world versus the for-profit world.
Yeah, I'll start with the career path. I mean, I have always been a huge media consumer and media lover and fan going back to when I was a little kid. I was born in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, and to Jamaican immigrant parents. And when I was about 2 years old, we moved to Jamaica, where I spent most of my childhood. And there in Jamaica at the time, there was only one television station. But even with only one, I just loved watching television, mostly reruns from the United States. But I just loved the medium. And I remember when I first came to the United States, when I was about 9 years old, the biggest excitement or biggest thrill to me was the fact that they had 3 TV stations.
Right. ABC, NBC, and CBS. That was it.
Yeah, and it was like, wow, I've died and gone to TV heaven here in the United States.
Right.
I was the kind of kid that would collect. There was a magazine called TV Guide that had the listings of all the shows, and I would just memorize the shows and when they come on. And I was particularly inspired by the ads, by the marketing material in the magazine, telling you what to watch. And then when you watch the channels themselves, I was also inspired by what they call the promos, the 30-second or 60-second video messages in the shows that got people excited about the shows. And that just made me really interested in this whole idea of entertainment marketing or media marketing. And when I was an undergrad student, I got a chance to intern at a TV station. I went to Stanford University on the West Coast, and I worked at a TV station in San Francisco. And I remember meeting the person who was what they call the promotion director, the person who was responsible for making the promotional messages that marketed the TV station. And I thought, at the age of 19, 20, like, that's the job I want to have. That's my dream job. And I've just been lucky that throughout my career, I've had roles where I've been able to market media and entertainment content, and been living that dream, for 35 years.
Did you ever get to actually produce promo videos? Did you ever get to fulfill that actual specific dream?
Yeah, when I finished at undergrad, I went to business school at UC Berkeley and studied marketing, and then I came to New York. I tried to get a job at a TV network. People at the local station said, if you really want to do this at the highest level, you need to work not just for a local station, but for ABC, NBC, CBS, right, which works at the time. And I remember writing letters to all 3 of them, and I still have even to this day in a box somewhere, the rejection letters from those networks. I couldn't get a job at the big time network TV right away, but I remember looking at the career path of some other successful entertainment executives, and some of them had started in the advertising business. Because in the advertising business, you're making little video, what they call them, commercials, to market goods and services. And so, there's a transferable skill there. And so I got a job at Young and Rubicam Advertising in New York, and that was my introduction into marketing. And a couple of years later, I was fortunate, again, just through chance, sitting next to someone on an airplane who was coming back from a TV conference who happened to work at CBS and knew about it.
Wow.
And I got a job at CBS TV network, and that was, my foot in the door. And then I worked at CBS for about 4 years. And then I went to work for the Disney Channel in marketing and creative services for another 8 years. And then I went to a network called Food Network in New York. That was a cable TV, network, and spent most of my career working at Food, and actually helped launch a network called Cooking Channel, which is where I got to go beyond just the marketing and branding part of TV, and got involved in the creative development of content. I was the general manager of Cooking Channel and helped create the network. And then I spent the last few years at the company, it was called Scripps Networks, that owned Food Network and Cooking Channel, working on digital streaming projects for them. And then we were acquired, as with all the consolidation, we were acquired by a company called Discovery, which is now acquired Warner Media.
Right.
But after that long year in TV, marketing and content, one of the things that had always been a priority for me throughout my career was representation and inclusion in content. Being a person who was an immigrant, a person of color, I always had a special affinity for making sure that that all voices and all stories were being represented in the content that we made. But at the end of the day, the brands that I worked on, that was not the number one priority of those brands. Whether it's a food channel or a kids channel. And one of the exciting opportunities about coming to NPR was, NPR's history has been targeting people with high quality cultural and informational program. And it's called National Public Radio. But one of the challenges is that over the years, we have not, our audience has not been reflective of the entire United States. It's been, mostly older, more highly educated, higher income, and less diverse people. And so when I came to the company, the number one priority, or the North Star that the CEO had set out, was all about diversifying our audiences and reaching the entire United States. So it was a nice happy accident or the nexus of what my personal goals were, and being able to express those, at a company that was really committed to that. So it's been a really exciting 3 years as I've been able to really focus on diversifying the NPR's audience.
Yeah, well, it's nice when your values align with your employer's values, and it sounds like they do.
Yeah, it's really, I think that I tell younger people that, often your career is in stages or phases. There might be that original phase of your career where you're just trying to get your foot in the door, get experience. You may not work at companies that are 100% aligned with your values, but you're learning great things. And then as you get deeper into your career and you have a little more experience and security and maybe a little more power, then you have more of an opportunity to try to align what you do with your values. And hopefully as you get to the end of your career, that connection can be really strong.
Yeah, and maybe even once you gain that power as you progress in your career, your values can even rub off on the company that you're a part of. It goes both ways. You're choosing the company because they align with you, but also you can influence those values.
Yeah, I think that definitely is true. The more influence that you have, I think the challenge, especially for many younger people, is how to live in that sort of no man's land of, I have these values, but I don't have the agency maybe to influence them as much as I want to. And what do I do? Do I wait? Do I start my own thing? So that's a challenge.
Okay, so I need you to be honest with us. Did you gain some weight when you were working for Food Network? I mean, you must have eaten a lot of really good food while you're working there.
I could have. I think one of I guess life just sort of has its own funny logic, is that when I was working in New York for Food Network, I was within walking distance of my office for the first year or so, and I was gaining weight. And then we moved our offices down to a part of New York called Chelsea, into a building called Chelsea Market, which was about a 25-minute bike ride from my office, or a long walk, a 45-minute walk. And so it changed my lifestyle dramatically. I began becoming a bike commuter to work for about 15 years. And it really got me into cycling as well. So I started riding to work, probably, 30 miles a week on bike commuting, and then riding on the weekends and sometimes in the evenings another 100 to 200 miles. So I was able to kind of do both, like eat as much as I want and burn it all off.
Yeah, thank goodness they moved offices. Otherwise, it
would have been a different fate.
Grown in other ways. So I believe everybody has a superpower, and I'm curious what either you've been told or you feel your superpower is.
Well, I think that it's having a unique ability to synthesize both the creative and analytical sides of business. Going back to when I was an undergraduate student, I was not initially a communications or media major. I was an engineering major because I was really good in math and science when I was in high school. And I'm still very interested in technology and in engineering and those kinds of things. But I'm also very interested in artistic things. I play the guitar and the piano. I've been in rock bands. I worked as a freelance photographer. And so I think I've been a person uniquely positioned in media because, over the last 10 to 15 years, probably the greatest force in media has been the influence on technology and how people consume media. And so it's been extremely disruptive, from the newspaper business to radio to now with video streaming and in television. And so I think having the ability to be, comfortable and, fluent in technology, but then also be able to understand the creative process and work with creative people, having been a creative person myself, has been something that served me well.
That's great. I'm curious where you either find inspiration for yourself or find inspiration for your team.
I find one of the biggest places I find inspiration is in seeing people flourish and seeing people develop. I remember when I worked at the Walt Disney Company years ago, we had a new division head, a woman named Jerry Laybourne, who was pretty renowned, very successful. She was one of the founders of the Nickelodeon TV network. And I remember asking her in sort of an all hands meeting, a similar question to what you asked about like, what's the thing you're most proud of, or what inspires you, in your career? And I was very surprised when she said the fact that, 4 people who had been her assistant through the years were now actually heads of TV networks. And that was to her her greatest success in her mind, and it just stuck with me that there's nothing more gratifying than having a vision and a strategy and a plan for a team, and then watching people just flourish and grow and be part of helping them achieve those dreams.
That's amazing. That's quite a track record of developing your people and working on that. I'm curious if there are some values that you want to demonstrate as a leader, or maybe ones that you would demand of people that would work with you or work for you.
Well, I'm a big fan of servant leadership, which is really the concept that the leader's role is to serve and empower and enable the people that you lead to be as successful as possible. So to me, that's the core value. I have this sort of 4-part leadership playbook that I've long relied on. And it's the first thing is that the leader's role is to set a vision and sort of a North Star and a framework for where we want to go. And then second is to assemble a team of people that really fit the vision. And then the third piece is to communicate that and to make sure everybody understands it and communicate it in a really inspiring way. And then the fourth thing is to give people the resources they need to be successful and to be kind of out there in front, clearing the brush before they have to get there and fighting the battles for them. And that's what I try to inspire the people that I work with in terms of being leaders. It's not about micromanaging or about doing their job for them or figuring out how to do it for them. It's sort of setting the path and giving them the resources to be as successful as they can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm envisioning a Sherpa, guiding them up the mountain, or a bush cutter, using a machete to clear the path and let them get where they're trying to go.
Yeah, because I think that as you become more senior, the thing that you really can add is that experience of dealing with a lot of what we call sort of emotional intelligence or political, issues that could be obstacles in business because of your experience in dealing with people and understanding, relationships. It's less about the more specific skill-based things, which I think kids today, when they get out of college, they have a lot of skills. They're smart. They're probably smarter than I was. They have higher SATs than I did when I was a student. So I'm not trying to be smarter than them at their jobs, but if there are ways that I can use my wisdom to help them be more effective, then that's where I have the most value.
That's great. So I want to talk about agencies for a minute, because setup helps marketers thrive by connecting them with the best people and resources. And that often means that we're matching brands with agencies that can fill gaps in either capacity or capability. And so we're not an agency, we're not on the client side, we're not a brand. We sort of live in that space in between and match them together. I'm curious, either at NPR or even in your previous roles, how you generally work with agencies. Do you work with agencies, and what does that usually look like for you?
Yeah, I've worked with agencies for many years. I have a special softness for agencies, given that I started my career working at one.
Yeah, mine are. Yeah.
It's I think it's very important to bring fresh thinking and new thinking into your organization, and that's what agencies can do. It's great when you have people from the outside who've worked on many other brands take a look at your brand and inject new ideas. So I think it's always useful to use agencies. One of the tensions is that too often I've seen in a lot of organizations is that some of the more exciting, maybe brand development or new product work or more innovative work tends to go to the agency, and the
Right.
in-house team can sometimes be demoralized by that, and there's a perception that the agency gets all of the sexy work and the in-house team does the grunt work. And so one thing I've really worked hard at is finding ways to deputize people within the existing in-house creative team to work closely in partnership with the agency to develop things so they can feel empowered and be really part of the process, and the agency doesn't feel like, oh, this is thing outside that's doing work while we're doing the grunt work.
Yeah. I'm wondering if there are certain functions that you feel almost always should be handled externally because you really need that outside perspective, or are there certain functions that you would almost always keep internal because you feel they're so core to the business that you don't want somebody external touching it?
A lot of it depends on the nature of the thing that you're marketing, and I guess the way to explain this is in TV is the production cycle. So, for example, if you're talking about advertising for a daily television show or for an episodic television show where you get the episode on Friday, you got to have the promo cut by Monday. That's often easier to do in-house because you're close to the work, right. You're close to the teams, and but when you're talking about a maybe longer term overall corporate branding strategy, campaign, which might take months of research and analysis and development and testing, often then that's when an agency is the most useful because they have the resources to do a lot of the research and analysis and many different executions and things like that. So that's what I found. I know at NPR we use agencies for our bigger brand defining work. And most of our, on the next episode of the TED Radio Hour kind of work is done in-house.
Makes sense. Makes sense. So I'm curious, as marketers, we often work with folks who aren't on the marketing team and maybe don't understand marketing, aren't in the day-to-day of marketing. So how do you show the value of marketing to those that are not part of the marketing organization?
Well, I think that I know in the media industry, it's not as difficult to get people interested in the marketing because everybody tends to be a consumer of this, the stuff that we do and has an opinion about it.
Right. Does that mean there are too many chefs though?
I pick any television show, from House of Dragons to, whatever, the Dropout. And I'm sure I walk up to anybody in the street and say, they can talk to you for an hour about why they like it or don't like it, or what should be, how would you sell that show? And what would you tell we do it all the time with media content, it's called word of mouth. We tell people about stuff. So I think it's easy for people to understand, what it is and what you're trying to do. The value part can be a little challenging because it is a little amorphous as to, in a lot of more performance marketing driven businesses, it's easier to say, okay, we spent this much money, we generated this many clicks, this many leads, it led to this many conversions. In entertainment, it's kind of hard to say, the Megan movie was a huge hit at the box office. How much of that was because of the marketing campaign? How much of that was because of the movie, the quality? Right. So it's harder to get numbers like ROI and other kinds of more specific KPIs, which then means that during economic challenges like the challenge we're going through right now for a lot of companies, marketing tends to be cut because it's the ROI is more amorphous, so you feel like there's less risk in cutting it. So that's one of the challenging dynamics. But I think that I know in the media space, in the years I've been in it, one of the things that people have come to appreciate more is the value of brand. and the fact that it's not just immediate ROI in terms of how many people watch a show, but you're building a brand and you're building an image that's going to, and especially now with streaming services where it is all about customer lifetime value and retaining people, and it's how they feel about their subscription more than it is about, did I watch something last night and how many, the old days of how many Nielsen, boxes clicked your show. So I think that's exciting if you're a marketer because the brand stuff is just much more interesting, I think, at least for me, than the transactional stuff.
That's great. Well, I once said, branding is long-term lead gen, right? I mean, Nike puts the swoosh everywhere because they hope that when you walk into the store, you pick the swoosh instead of the three stripes.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, brand is the basis that leads to the ROI eventually. Yeah. Just a slower burn and the heart, and to your point about it's more amorphous thing to measure the connection from the brand all the way through to the transaction.
Yeah, I think that in media and entertainment, it is before the cable era, brand wasn't that big of a priority because there wasn't as much competition. There were three TV networks. They were all kind of the same in a way, the similar brands. They offer general entertainment. The cable era really, I think, turbocharged the marketing skill and function within entertainment because now all of a sudden you're trying to create, very targeted networks, very targeted channels with a specific target audience and brand promise. Whether it's a cooking channel or HGTV or the travel channel or the ESPN, the sports network, or the Lifetime, the women's network, and that's been I've noticed that you saw a lot of people coming from packaged goods backgrounds into the media space because packaged goods have always been about brand, and I think that we'll see that continue in media and entertainment.
Cool. So I'm wondering if there's a specific program or campaign or something that you've worked on either at NPR or in a previous life that taught you a valuable lesson, either because it was a huge flop and you don't ever want to do that again, or because it was a huge success and you wanted to see if there's a way you'd emulate that in the future.
Well, picking up on the brand thing, Food Network, when we first started, the brand was defined as being kind of a utility, like a cooking teacher for people that wanted to learn how to cook. And we did research and found that there was a ceiling on that. There was maybe only 20 to 30% of the population that really wanted to learn to cook. Most Americans love to eat, but they're not super into food preparation. So we knew that if we were going to grow our business, we needed to kind of reimagine what the role of the network would be in people's minds. And we found that there, at the same time, this was back in the kind of the mid 2000s, that reality television, TV about real things and real life experiences was starting to really take off at that time. We had The Apprentice and Survivor and all these other reality shows. And we found that, there's something about the food competitions and shows about people running restaurants or shows about people traveling and experiencing food and competitions around food that are just really great storytelling reality shows that are set in the food world. And they're not about teaching you to cook. And if we could reimagine Food Network as just a really enjoyable reality channel like Nat Geo or Bravo or Discovery Channel, we would really broaden the addressable market of people who might be interested in the channel. And so we came up with a campaign to do that, and we tested tons of taglines and thought about interesting ways to talk about how we're more than the food channel, and we reach your life and we change your life in all these other ways. And I remember in one of the focus groups, a potential viewer just said, why don't you just tell us that you're just not a cooking channel, you're just more than cooking. And so the tagline we said was, Food Network is way more than cooking. Not very fancy, but that was our tagline for a campaign that we ran for several years. And it really helped redefine people's vision of the network from, someone in a white chef's coat to people competing, doing Chopped or doing, Food Network Star or Guy's Grocery Games. So it just really reinvented what the network could be, and helped the network go from being like a number 40 ranked cable network to a top 10 cable network.
Wow. Well, and you still reinforce the core. When you say more than cooking, you're reinforcing that it is cooking, but there's more to see there beyond it.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
It didn't hurt the core. It's just added to the core.
Yeah, and I think at the heart of the shows, if you think of a show like Chopped, they are cooking, but it's cooking in a context that anybody could enjoy, because it's just watching the competition and the fun and the excitement and learning about the people who are doing it. So that was probably one of the lessons I take today, even to NPR, is that we're not just a utility providing you the news, for example, but to step back and think about what role do we really play in your life emotionally, and it's really about making you feel smarter about your world, maybe a little more self-confident, or maybe we make you feel a little more relaxed, a little less stressed out because you kind of understand the world a little better, and playing to that more than hey, we've got the best news.
Yeah, and I think there's something else in what you said, both about your time at the Food Network and even at NPR, which is moving from utility to even entertainment. I mean, you think about when you watch a cooking reality show or Man versus Food, or or Chopped or something like that. It's not just about people that like to prepare food. It's about watching and gathering some insights about the people.
Mm-hmm.
So that's entertaining, and I think same thing with NPR, that it's not just about the story, it's about the personalities that make up the story. And so I love that in a medium like this that's all about storytelling, tradition tells us that there's a hero of stories, and there's villains, and there's enablers, and there's all kinds of other. And I think that NPR definitely does an amazing job of telling the story in a compelling way that also makes you, to your point, feel better about your world, and because you're more educated and informed and all of that.
Yeah, I think it's a challenge for video and audio information companies that the internet brought on. I think before the internet, you did a combination of the storytelling you described, but you also were the main way people got information, like basic facts, yeah. Like what the weather is, or what the sports score is, or what the recipe is. But the internet has allowed people to get all of that, from Wikipedia or just Google searches. So you don't need to spend as much time on that kind of utility detail. But what the internet can't do as well is the curated storytelling, and so that's where we try to focus.
I think of Moth Radio Hour. I think of Bullseye. I think of Tiny Desk concerts and such. I mean, those are all good examples of, it's not just about the news, it's about the story and the and engaging your mind, even if that's not just informing you of it may just be engaging you in some other way. And I that's one of the things I appreciate most about NPR.
Yeah, well, public radio, when it started, the charter was to be a complement to the for-profit commercial media system. You go back to Marshall McLuhan in the 1960s and the vast wasteland of television, and the people were bemoaning the fact that the commercial media system was producing a certain kind of content, and there was maybe the kind of you're describing, more thoughtful, maybe a little more inspirational or interesting content, wasn't being produced enough. And so the Public Broadcasting Act of 1967 was designed to do that, to fund PBS and public radio stations to pursue that kind of content without a profit motive. And and we still see that as our role today, is to look at the media landscape and what are the stories that aren't being told. Maybe what are the things that sort of underneath the surface that could be looked at in a different way. And without the profit motive driving us, we have the freedom to tell those stories.
I love it. All right, so we're going to wrap up with, I've got a couple of quick rapid fire questions for fun that have nothing to do with marketing. One is there a certain book or team or movie or a quote or band that inspires you, and what about it inspires you?
It's a simple book, but it goes back to how to win friends and influence people. I think it's almost a 100-year-old book from Dale Carnegie. But
Yeah.
one thing I've learned in my career is the importance of winning friends, of building relationships with people. When I was younger, this goes back to more of my engineering sort of side of my brain, where I just felt like, it's all about the numbers, it's all about the facts. If you just have the best information and you just keep your head down and just have the best argument, you'll always be able to have influence. And as I grown through my life, I've just learned that that may be 50% of it, or maybe 30% of it. A lot of life is about how people feel and about the relationships that you build with people. That will push your influence a lot more than the actual facts and tech and the tech in your ideas. And, it takes me to another quote that I still come back to today. It was made many years ago by Maya Angelou, and the quote was, people will forget what you said, they'll forget what you did, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. And that gets back to that thing about relationships and how you make people feel being so important to the influence that you have.
Well, I'll tell you, Michael, one of my biggest regrets in life is that Maya Angelou was a professor at my alma mater, and I never got to take a class from her.
Oh, wow.
I graduated from Wake Forest University, and she was a professor there. Okay, so I think last question.
Unfortunately, have all the YouTube videos and
yeah, exactly,
that you can go back and watch.
She was such an amazing inspiration, and I kicked myself that I didn't get a chance to take a class with her. But I'm curious if there's a brand that you really admire that you've never worked on, and what is it that you admire about that brand? And maybe we'll wrap up with that question.
Yeah, sure. I've always admired the Apple brand because they're one of the few brands that's been able to have a second and a third act. Most brands have that sort of their one big thing and then it sustains, whether it's, the Ford Motor Company, popularizing cars, or Facebook, popularizing social media. But Apple, from the personal computer to popularizing music, MP3 consumption, basically digital music consumption, to the smartphone, and now maybe it'll be AR and VR, but they seem to always be able to evolve and reinvent themselves, but based on the same principle of taking cutting edge technology and making it intelligible and easy to use for the general public. And whatever that technology is, that's sort of the inherent belief, is that, if smartwatches had come out, 10, 15 years ago, they kind of fizzled, but then Apple figured out a way to make it, into a product that's easy to use and beautiful, and to me, that's the really exciting thing about how they've maintained their essence, but been able to apply it time and time again to different types of products and continue to reinvent themselves.
Yeah, so I think we'll probably all be riding in Apple self-driving cars soon or something. Like there'll be, what is the next thing that they'll come out with that's going to blow our minds and change the way we live our lives?
Yeah, and the smart thing is that they're never first. They wait patiently for the space to mature and then take a thoughtful look at it. So, they weren't the first PC, they weren't the first MP3 player, they weren't the first smartphone, they weren't the first smartwatch, they weren't the first streaming service. They won't be the first EV autonomous vehicle either. But when they get there, they usually are the most impactful.
Yeah. Everybody forgets the Zune, Michael. Everybody forgets the Zune.
Or even though we go, what is it, the Creative or the Rio, the Diamond? Remember the Diamond?
Yeah, right. These are, for those who don't know, these are early MP3 players that got crushed by the iPod eventually when the iPod came out.
Yeah, or the Palm Trio phone.
Right, Palm Pilot. Pilot, the Trio, excellent. Well, Michael Smith, this has been such a pleasure. Michael Smith is the Chief Marketing Officer for NPR. Thank you so much for this time together. It's been such a fun treat.
Oh, it was great, Joe. It was great to talk to you.